London, 2022. A man in a fireproof suit sets fire to a painting worth thousands of dollars, deliberately, with a smile. This is not vandalism. This is art. Rome, 2010. An architect opens a building that doesn't have a single right angle. The engineers who built it said, "This is impossible." She answered, "Then we will be the first to do it." Dublin, 1992. An artist dies. Behind him, he leaves a studio, the dirtiest room in the history of art. This room will be taken apart piece by piece and moved to another country as a museum exhibit. All the trash, every cigarette butt, every paint stain on the floor. Kazakhstan, 2006. Light flashes at the peak of a pyramid. Not light bulbs, glass. The artist spent years ensuring the light fell exactly like this, at a specific angle, at a specific time of day, so the viewer would feel something that cannot be described in words. 4 artists, 4 revolutions, one story about what it means to create the impossible. There is a question everyone asks themselves, from art school students to the directors of the world's largest museums. What makes art great? Technique? No. Thousands of artists mastered technique perfectly, whose names no one remembers. Beauty? No. Beauty is subjective, changeable, dependent on era and culture. Money? Definitely not. History knows dozens of cases where geniuses were unnoticed in life and bought for millions after death. Great art does one thing. It changes how you see the world, before and after. You look at a painting, a building, a stained glass window, and something inside you shifts irreversibly. An angle of perception, the ability to notice, the idea of what is even possible. 4 artists, 4 revolutions, one story about what it means to create the impossible. The man who removed lead. There is a word that kills any art. That word is decorative. When they say decorative stained glass, they mean beautiful but not necessary. Ornament, background, something you glance at on the way to something important. Brian Clarke dedicated his life to proving this is a lie. Born in 1953 in Burnley, an industrial town in northern England, Clarke was obsessed with light from childhood. Not painting, not sculpture, specifically light. How it changes space. How a morning ray through a dirty factory window turns an ordinary room into something sacred. At 17, he's already working in a stained glass workshop, learning from masters, studying medieval techniques, and gradually he understands something that will turn his career around. Lead is the enemy. In traditional stained glass, lead cames are structurally necessary. They hold pieces of colored glass together, but they also cut the image into fragments. They're heavy, dark, rigid. They limit form. They tell the artist you can only create what fits into a grid. Clarke begins experimenting with new glass bonding technologies, epoxy resins, special compounds that hold glass without visible structure, and gradually in his works, the lead disappears. Only color remains, only light. A membrane between worlds. Clarke calls stained glass a membrane, not a window, not a wall, not an ornament, specifically a membrane. A thin boundary between what is outside and what is inside, between the physical world and the world of sensation. His works are not images in the conventional sense. They are programs for human perception. Clarke designs not what the viewer will see, but what the viewer will feel. Euphoria, calm, dizziness from beauty. When in 2006 he creates the stained glass pyramid in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, architects ask him to make something beautiful. Clarke does something else. He calculates the angles of light fall at different times of day. Morning, cold blue, gathering attention. Day, neutral white, allowing thought. Evening, warm gold, dissolving tension. The building literally changes the mood of visitors depending on the time of day. Architecture as pharmacology, light as medicine. His night-stained glasses go even further. Ordinary stained glass works only in daylight. It is passive. It waits for the sun. Clarke flips the logic. His stained glass in Bahrain airport glows from within in the dark. They do not reflect light, they emit it. They are visible from outside the building as luminous panels. Day, one image; night, completely different. One work, two existences. Heir to the greats. Clarke consciously writes himself into a tradition 5 centuries old. He studied Chartres Cathedral as carefully as modern technologies. He corresponded with Picasso, and Picasso answered. He was friends with Francis Bacon, the artist we will meet in the next part of this story. But despite all continuity, Clarke does something no one could do before him. He frees light from history. His stained glasses do not tell biblical stories, do not depict saints. They tell the story of light itself, about how a photon passing through colored glass turns into an experience. This is painting without paint, sculpture without material, architecture without walls. The dirtiest room in history. 7 Rees Memes, London, South Kensington. When Francis Bacon died in 1992 at the age of 82, his studio was exactly as he left it. No one cleaned anything, no one touched anything. What those who entered saw was indescribable. Walls covered in layers of paint applied over decades. Several thousand photographs, magazine cutouts, reproductions scattered on the floor, attached to walls, stuffed in cracks, broken brushes, dried paint, empty bottles, dirty rags, cigarette butts, books with dog-eared pages, broken mirrors. This was not a mess. This was a system. Chaotic, incomprehensible to an outsider, but absolutely consistent for the artist who worked in it. Irish gallerist Hugh Lane made an incredible decision: moved the studio entirely to Dublin. The entire floor was dismantled into parts, each item numbered and photographed, every paint stain documented. It took several years and the participation of forensic experts to accurately restore the position of each of the approximately 7,000 items. Today, this studio is one of the most visited museum exhibits in Ireland. People come not to look at paintings, they come to look at the conditions in which the paintings were born. This tells us something important about Bacon. For him, the process was inseparable from the result.
Bacon once formulated his goal with surgical precision. I want the image to attack the nervous system as directly as possible. Not through intellect, not through emotion, through the nervous system. Like a blow, like a bright light in darkness, like a sudden sound. His figures are people passed through some invisible press. Their flesh is deformed, twisted, smeared. Their faces are faces that have seen something unbearable or have become something unbearable. The boundary between man and piece of meat in Bacon is deliberately blurred. This is not cruelty for cruelty's sake. This is honesty. Bacon was born in Dublin in 1909. Childhood, violence of a military father, strict discipline, complete misunderstanding. Youth, Berlin and Paris of the 1920s, freedom and excesses that only Bohemian Europe between 2 wars could afford. War, post-war London with its grayness and destruction. Bacon saw much, too much, and his painting is an attempt to honestly say what he saw, about the fragility of the body, about violence as the foundation of human relations, about what under the beautiful surface there is always flesh, and flesh is mortal. the method of methodlessness. Bacon had no technique in the usual sense. He did not make preliminary sketches, did not build composition in advance. He took a photograph, most often from medical atlases, crime reports, and began to work, smearing paint with a rag, scraping, layering again. A random stroke could become a key element of the painting or destroy weeks of work. He destroyed most canvases himself. Only units remained, those where chance coincided with intention so precisely that he couldn't burn them. "I never know what will happen," Bacon said. "If I know, it's not interesting." His triptychs, the form he returned to again and again, are not a story in 3 parts. These are 3 variants of one impossibility, 3 attempts to catch what slips away. As if the artist knew truth won't fit in one painting. You need 3, and still not all of it. Friendship with the diamond. Among the few close people in Bacon's life was Brian Clarke, the very light artist from the first part of our story. Bacon and Clarke were friends, despite their art being complete opposites. Bacon, darkness, deformation, chaos. Clarke, light, clarity, euphoria. Perhaps precisely because of this. Great artists rarely befriend those similar to themselves. They need mirrors that show what you don't see yourself. Bacon saw in Clarke a possibility he never used himself, liberation through beauty. Clarke saw in Bacon permission he didn't give himself, honesty through ugliness. Together, they made up the full spectrum.
The Woman Who Was Told No. 1977. A young Iraqi student defends her diploma project at the Architectural Association in London. The project is called Malevich's Tectonic, a reinterpretation of a hotel on Hungerford Bridge through the prism of Russian suprematism. The building exists only on paper. Professors look at the drawings and don't know what to say. This is not architecture in the usual sense. This is an explosion. Shards, sharp angles piercing space like shards of glass, lines that don't meet where they should meet, surfaces that exist in multiple planes simultaneously. Her name is Zaha Hadid, and for the next 20 years, they will tell her no. Projects win competitions and aren't built. Clients choose her concept and hire another architect. Reasons vary: too expensive, too complex, too unpredictable. The real reason is one: no one believes this can actually be built. Hadid continues to design, draws buildings no one ordered, sells paintings with architectural projects as works of art, because as buildings, they don't exist yet. She becomes famous as the architect of paper buildings. This is an insult. She accepts it as a program. The First Shot. 1993. Small German town, Weil am Rhein. Furniture company Vitra is building a new production campus and decides to make it an architectural manifesto. Each building another great architect: Frank Gehry, Tata Ando, Nicholas Grimshaw, and Zaha Hadid, who is given the smallest building on the campus, a fire station. A fire station is a utilitarian structure: garage for cars, locker room, break room, nothing interesting. Hadid builds a building that looks like arrested movement, sharp inclined planes, as if the building froze at the moment of a jump. Lines that are not parallel or perpendicular, they slice space diagonally, creating a constant sense of dynamics. Concrete that seems stretched like a bowstring. When journalists come to the opening and ask the firefighters what it's like to work inside, they shrug. Uncomfortable, angles sharp, furniture doesn't fit normally. Hadid doesn't apologize. The building creates tension, she says. Firefighters must be in constant readiness. Architecture helps. This is provocation. It is also pure truth.
Liquid world. After the fire station, the world begins to notice Hadid, slowly, skeptically, but noticing. The next decade, she develops what will become her signature language, parametric architecture. Buildings designed using algorithms that mimic natural forms, flow of water, growth of a crystal, movement of wind. Contemporary Arts Center in Cincinnati, 2003. First American building designed by a woman architect. Interior built around the concept of an urban carpet, continuous floor surface that smoothly rises and becomes wall, ceiling, staircase. Inside the building, there is no clear division into floors. There is continuous movement.
Glass ceiling and Pritzker Prize. In 2004, Zaha Hadid receives the Pritzker Prize, the architectural equivalent of the Nobel Prize. First woman in history. At the ceremony, one of the journalists asks if it was harder for her because she was a woman. Hadid looks at him for a long second. Harder because I'm a woman? Harder because I'm an Arab? Harder because I did what no one did before me? Choose one reason. I'll add the rest myself. She died in 2016 from a heart attack. She was 65. More than a dozen unfinished projects remained. The Bureau continues working, finishing what she started. Her buildings stand on 6 continents. Each is a question addressed to earthly gravity. What if laws of nature are not limitations, but an invitation to play? Shark in formaldehyde. 1991. A young British artist buys a tiger shark 4 meters long, places it in a tank with formaldehyde, names the work "The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living." Auction price, $8 million. Art world explodes. Critics divide exactly in half. Some say it's genius, literal materialization of the deepest human fear. Others say it's fraud. Anyone can buy a shark and put it in a tank. Damien Hirst smiles, because precisely this debate is the work of art. Hirst was born in 1965 in Bristol. From childhood, morgues, medical textbooks, images of death that most people avoid. Hirst walked towards them, not from unhealthy interest, from an attempt to understand what everyone knows, but no one looks in the face. We will all die, and we all pretend this is not so. Dots, butterflies, pharmacy. In the 1990s, Hirst launches 3 series that will turn him into the most expensive living artist in the world. Spot paintings, canvases covered with identical circles of different colors, arranged in a correct grid. No expression, no personal gesture. Hirst even admits most of them he didn't paint himself, only the first few. This outrages everyone. What kind of artist doesn't paint his paintings? But this is exactly the question Hirst wants to ask. What makes a painting valuable? The artist's hand or his idea? If the idea belongs to Hirst and execution to his assistants, is it still Hirst? Butterfly paintings, huge symmetrical patterns from real dried butterflies mounted into canvas with paint. Beauty and death literally connected in one object. Something impossibly beautiful, and at the same time, a cemetery. Pharmacy. Installation recreating a real pharmacy with thousands of medical drugs. Medicine as religion. Pills as communion. White coats as vestments. Our faith in science is as irrational as medieval faith in miracles. We just don't notice it, because our religion is called progress. Treasures of the Unbelievable. 2017, Venice Biennale. Hirst opens the largest project of his career. He tells a story. Allegedly, in the Indian Ocean, they found a sunken ship from the 2nd century AD, Apistos, unbelievable.
The ship carried a collection of sculptures by the greatest collector of antiquity, named Amophet. Golden statues of Hercules, bronze heads, marble torsos covered with corals and shells after 2,000 years on the ocean floor. All this in 2 palaces of Venice, 189 works, photographs of underwater shoots, documentary film about the discovery.
Visitors walked for hours, mouths open. And then it turned out this is all fiction, from beginning to end. No ship, no Amophet. Hirst created everything himself and intentionally aged, covered with shells, shot underwater, made documentation. He created not artifacts, he created faith in artifacts. And here is the key question. When you learned this was a mystification, did you feel deceived or amazed by the mastery of deception? And if the beauty you experienced was real, does it matter that its history is invented? Currency and fire. 2021, Hirst announces Project The Currency. He created 10,000 unique small works, each covered with multicolored dots. Each has its own name, own history, own signature. Each work has a physical embodiment and a digital NFT token. Buyers pay $2,000, receive NFT, then a year to choose, keep NFT or exchange it for physical work. But if you take physical, NFT is destroyed. If you keep NFT, physical painting is burned. In 2022, Hirst in a fireproof suit ignites paintings, one after another, those whose owners chose digital. About 5,000 works turned to ash. This was not performance for attention. This was an experiment with the nature of value. What is more expensive, physical object or record of it in blockchain? What is more real, what you can touch or what cannot be destroyed? Buyers divided approximately in half. Half chose physics, half digital. Hirst says this about us more than about technologies. We ourselves don't know what we believe in, what the market believes in, what history believes in. The shark in the tank has already rotted. It had to be replaced. Digital record in blockchain untouched. Which of these is the work of art? Brian Clarke programs experience through light. Francis Bacon attacks through flesh. Zaha Hadid liberates through form. Damien Hirst provokes through value. 4 methods, 4 languages, 1 question. What do you see when you look? Most people look at the world and see what they expect to see. Apartment is walls and ceiling. Body is shape under clothes. Money is paper with numbers. Light is just what allows not to bump into furniture. Artist is a person who sees differently, not because smarter, not because more talented, but because at some point decided to look without protective filters that most of us put on so as not to overload. Clarke looks at a ray of light and sees opportunity to change someone's state of consciousness.
But there is another side. Clarke gave decades to work most people walk past. Bacon lived life in voluntary isolation in a studio that couldn't be called fit for living. Hadid, 20 years, heard no from clients, from system, from gravity. Hirst risks reputation with every new provocative gesture and sometimes loses. Great art requires great price, not always financial, often personal. This is not romanticization of artists' suffering. This is simply observation. People who change how we see the world, as a rule, see the world differently than most from the very beginning. And this is not always comfortable, neither for them nor for those around. Greek word optics means science of vision, but in a figurative sense, it means something greater, way of seeing the world, angle of perception, set of filters through which information turns into meaning. Great art changes optics. After Clarke, you notice light, how it falls, how it changes space. Stained glass in the metro, which you passed 1,000 times, suddenly becomes different. After bacon, you notice body, its tension, its vulnerability. Random gesture of stranger in cafe suddenly reads as whole story. After Hadid, you notice space, how building makes you move, how ceiling changes your mood. Right angle in office, which you accepted as given, suddenly seems like a choice, and not the best one. After Hirst, you notice cost, why one is considered valuable and another not. Who decided, when, and can this decision be revised? This is exactly what makes art great. Not beauty, not technique, not price at auction, irreversible change of how you see. And under any sky, in any city, in any era, person who knows how to look anew is richer than anyone who looks the old way. Only one question: are you ready to change optics?